What's up, everybody? Welcome back, and today we're talking about a form of cheating that is called ghosting. It's very popular to throw out accusations of ghosting. However, a lot of the times the accusations of ghosting is unfounded or it's just because of bad play on the part of the accuser. So let's take a moment to discuss this, but first hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below, and let's get to it. Now, it should go without saying, but this video is in no way, shape, or form an endorsement of the act of ghosting. Instead, I wanted to discuss why some of the claims made about ghosting can often be inaccurate. And admins have become pretty adept at finding out who is actually ghosting, which can result in a ban. And if there is good evidence of it, they can also report you to the community ban list, which can prevent you from joining servers if your rating dips because of bans or multiple bans. So with all that out of the way, what exactly is ghosting? It's sort of divided into two parts. First is a communication aspect. For example, someone on Team 1 may be providing information to someone on Team 2. Depending on the information, this sort of removes the fog of war for Team 2. Team 2 can use that information to some sort of advantage. Maybe it's where certain assets are, where certain objectives are, to help Team 2 plan and move accordingly during the match, which is sort of the second part of what ghosting is. So obviously the communication aspect is huge, but the acting upon the communication is even more significant. So for example, if members of Team 1 are telling members of Team 2 something specific, like a radio placement, and then Team 2 is acting upon that information, you've sort of completed the whole life cycle of what ghosting is. But realistically, it only takes the communication aspect. If you are just sharing information about your team and your team's positions and assets, you are ghosting. And you can have someone acting upon that information, attacking the assets that are actually communicated, and that is the other half of what ghosting can be. Now, I think there's a misconception about how ghosting actually happens. A lot of folks consider random advances secure to be truly random, but it is not at all that random. Now, I bring up this game mode because it's supposed to be the one that I guess provides some sense of security to the team that the other team doesn't know what the objectives are. Now, to be clear, ghosting can exist within AAS, territory control, or even invasion. But because it's random advances secure, I think there's more security around the fact that there's some level of fog of war. But that is primarily just an illusion. Now, given that you can only see the current objective you are on and the next objective that you can attack, there is a limitation to how far you can see. However, these points are sort of pre-planned, and it's actually given to you when you go into the map voting phase before the round. I don't think enough people utilize this information. Just on the map voting page, you can click the eye icon for information, and you can see the possible caps on each map that you are voting for. Now, of course, some of these maps may have a more widespread set of objectives. But typically, if you start to look at caps as the map is progressing, you can begin to narrow it down into lanes. I've also suggested looking for clusters of objectives where you can send infantry or vehicles to hopefully get near a cap just based on the high probability that a cap may be there because there's a bunch of POIs in that area. Now remember, even though the map is selected, you can still review the objectives. That way, you can actually utilize that information to help determine what type of faction you may want to vote for. And of course, at the start of a round or during a round, you can still go back and visit the map. You'll just have to use the first few points to help designate maybe the direction you need to send folks towards. And this is all important because I think a lot of folks ignore this, and this is something that is pretty handy to have, especially for newer players, to help understand where they should be going, what they should be doing, and how they should be maneuvering during a round. But simultaneously, it gives more advanced players the information and data they need to help figure out how they can backline or attack the enemy objectives that are a little bit earlier in their progression. Not to mention, there are external resources you can use to help narrow down what the objectives are moving forward through a map. Now, I understand that some folks don't like outside resources being utilized, that they sort of frown upon it because, again, it takes away more of the sort of randomness of the gameplay. I do think this can be helpful for newer players to at least review occasionally and to help understand where POIs are and how some rounds may work. It's going to sort of level up their gameplay without having all the hours that a more advanced set of players are going to have. But regardless of your opinion of it, it exists, and therefore people are going to use it. It's no different than having the mortar calculator to give you more accurate mortar placement. Now, with enough time in the game, you can start to understand the certain lanes and areas where objectives can go based on the direction of caps. For example, if caps are moving east, there are certain POIs that exist along the eastern side of the map that are likely objectives. So how does all of this tie back to accusations of ghosting? Well, if you know where objectives are going to be, it's going to help narrow down where to attack, where to send infantry to disrupt backline stuff that the enemy team is doing. Combined with a little bit of recon and some luck, you can start to figure out where things are. It's not overly difficult to narrow down possible objectives and then start attacking in those areas, spreading out infantry, and finding something like a hab, a radio, maybe a repair station. And then from there, you begin to narrow down what you can destroy, what you can take out to hurt the enemy team. But all this can be done without information being shared between one team and another team. Instead, it's sort of the data and the information that can be compiled very quickly, along with some recon to help you understand where to go and how to attack. There's so many things that go underutilized during rounds. For example, helicopter pilots that can also communicate well can typically tell you troop movement, maybe even vehicle movement, to help kind of figure out and guide where your infantry needs to attack. You can use the commander UAV, not just for placing down an airstrike or artillery, but also to help gather information, again, to help figure out how to attack. Having a few guys dedicated to some form of recon or backlining can be really beneficial, especially if they are able to utilize sound to help narrow down where things are or where things are moving. You can track some of the vehicle movements along with possible objectives that you've seen on the map to begin determining where enemies are setting up FOBs. So utilizing some sensory information along with the objectives that are on the map, you can start attacking backlines of enemy positions, which is going to make it very difficult for them to move forward if they can't protect their defensive positions. These are largely just things that teams can do on the fly during a round to gain some sort of advantage. And I will say this, a more advanced group is not necessarily going to attack your objective. They're going to attack the things that support that objective. If it's a defensive position that you are trying to hold, they're going to be looking to attack how you make a sustainable defense, which means going after things like radios, rallies, and habs. If they can disrupt your ability to support the defensive position, it makes it much easier for them to attack the objective. So again, with all that in mind, let's consider what your team may be doing that can also benefit the opposing team. If you are setting radios on objectives, that makes it a little bit easier for them to find if they have a list of possible objectives to begin with. It becomes even easier if you're leaving these undefended or with enough emplacements for it to be noticeable that there is some sort of fob there. If you leave logistics vehicles next to radios, if you place radios next to habs, you're again making it much easier. Even placing habsco walls, a repair station, or barbed wire next to an entrance to a building to cover up the radio or to at least conceal the radio isn't a safe bet. It may slow a team down, but it doesn't necessarily prevent them from getting to the radio. It can almost act as a signal that maybe something's in that building. Groups with good game sense can utilize emplacements to help narrow down your radio position. Everything from ammo boxes to habsco walls have to be built in a fob build radius. So you can place a bunch of fob creations down on that one or two things that you find and begin to narrow where your radio is. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of someone complaining of something like ghosting or how did you find that radio when outside the building it was just a ton of barbed wire. There's also instances of folks building on the white line, the connector between objectives, which is the most common path for blueberries and infantry just to move along. And if they're just walking the path and they run into a hab and radio that are undefended or minimally defended, obviously it's something worth taking down. So you have to be mindful about what you are doing when you're thinking about making it difficult for an enemy team and you happen to actually be making it easier for them. If you're not going to use the information that's sort of provided to your team and use the data you can find along the way during a round, you're often going to be at a disadvantage because someone else is going to utilize that information. And just because they are working to disrupt your ability to hold positions, they're attacking radios, fobs, and things that you thought were going to be difficult to find doesn't mean they are ghosting. And of course, that doesn't mean that ghosting doesn't happen, because it certainly does. It's unfortunate that it does happen, but I wanted to make this video just to sort of discuss the fact that it doesn't happen, I think, as often as people think it does. More times than not, it's one team operating at a slightly higher level, utilizing some of the information that they can obtain, game sense, as well as recon to better determine how to attack and position, which often is very disruptive for the opposing team. And the speed that that team can move with that information is super important to really making a drastic difference in how those teams are going to operate and which team is going to be successful. So if you're relatively new to Squad, I hope this gives you some insights on what to understand might be happening to your team that isn't ghosting necessarily, but it's just more advanced play. And if you're new to this channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.